This is the bizarre story of how a communist official wasted $21 billion to get promotions in the power ladder, leaving behind a new guy who is jealous but doesn't want to pick up the tab, and a female contractor who spent the last 8 years seeking payments of $30 million worth of unpaid work she did for the last guy. And now she's being tried for provoking trouble in court. The story is trending in China. Welcome to China Insider. I'm David Zhang. This is perhaps the perfect example of how Chinese politics work at the local level. This is Guizhou province, the southern part of China that was consumed by forest fire, as we talked about in our previous episode on it. But now there's an even more bizarre story coming from the province. This is the city of Liupanshui in the western part of Guizhou province. A former city official named Li spent over $20 billion in 3 years on infrastructure and tourism. Infrastructure, as we know in China, only looks good, not so functional, and it's definitely a money waster. Tourism, well, that's a similar story. But hey, it looks good enough to get you noticed by the higher-ups, and that's exactly the plan of Li, who at the time was only 50 years old, the perfect age in the eyes of CCP officials to be promoted to the higher part of the political ladder. Well, Li had a perfect slogan for the people of the city, under a context called Three Revolutions. He claimed that he will transform the farmers into shareholders, transform resources into assets, and transform funds into shares. In other words, he scammed the living heck out of the people in the city. Now, Li, of course, has since been arrested, removed from party titles, and fallen from grace. In his TV confession, he says, quote, he's never planned to pay the debt that he incurred. Well, in 3 years, he put up 23 new tourist destinations in the city, planted 260 square miles of prickly pear trees, and Guizhou, well, rarely snows. It's in the southern part of China, yet Mr. Li here wanted to spend $416 million for a ski resort. Of the 23 new tourist spots, 16 of them, as the state media refers to them as idle or inefficient, but as we know, they're simply useless. And in order to be promoted from a city-level CCP official, he used these developments as career achievements, racking up a tremendous amount of debt in the city. Eventually, of course, he was promoted to the provincial-level deputy party boss. Unfortunately, though, for him, last November marked the end of his career. The story of Li, at the expense of taxpayer money and scamming people, actually doesn't end there. It's actually the start. The damage, of course, was already done. A woman named Miss Ma, who is a local contractor, has been seeking payments from the city for the last 8 years, aka Li's municipal administration for the work that her company had done. Now, these government contracts, they're thought to be the solid footballs for her, ended up being almost a decade-long money-seeking campaign. Now, this was, of course, her first mistake. Since 2016, Ms. Ma had successfully taken over 10 government projects in the city, including projects on poverty relocation, museums, hotels, monorail tour buses, etc. Now, of course, this was all part of that grandiose plan of Li. And while Li was the city Communist Party boss at the time, and so all of this was to spend money, and spend money on tourism and everything else in between. And after winning the projects, she invested heavily in development and construction. But after more than 3 years of construction, by August of 2019, 8 of the 10 projects had been finished and then handed over. The construction of the other 2 projects, they were basically suspended by official reasons, so technically all 10 of them, Ms. Ma had successfully completed them. And all that remains was waiting for the city officials to pay her for the project funds. Of course, that's a total of 30 million US dollars. And that's mistake number 2, trusting the words of CCP officials. Here's a picture of her record showing the 10 projects that are unpaid, totaling $30 million. Now, it's of course in Chinese currency, about 220 million yuan, which I of course converted to the US dollars. Opportunities always coexist with risks, especially in China. When you take over the projects, you also take over the risk. By this time, Li had been promoted to member of the Standing Committee of Guizhou Provincial Party Committee, as well as the secretary of the Guiyang Municipal Party Committee. In the words of the Chinese people, he flew away to a higher place for the time being, and she was left scrambling. In a total for about $30 million in contract payment, guess how much she actually got over the years? 0. And then there's mistake number 3, believing that justice would eventually side with the righteous people. Wrong. They always end up siding with the government because the definition of justice in China is twisted and bent to the CCP. That's because last November, she was actually sentenced to charges of provoking trouble by local authority. Her lawyer made a video event saying by the time that you see this video, I would have disappeared, if you know what I mean. Now, the successor to Li, the new city officials, they don't want to pay the tab of their predecessor, and they don't want to pick up the debt, aka the unpaid work that incurred during the 3 years when Li was in office. And obviously, they were also jealous, right? Why didn't I get to spend $20 billion recklessly? Ugh. And so to her, the question is, why did she work with Li in the first place to begin with? Well, this is actually a typical relationship in China of business owners and government officials. Securing government contracts is seen as climbing close to power, and they sort of go hand in hand. They would receive connections, established locally as a powerful business owner, and have political backings for future ventures. But little did she know that once she was used for her contract work, she would be tossed aside. And before we continue with the story, here is a sponsored segment from Puriton. If there is one supplement you want to get incorporated into your diet, it's a good omega-3 supplement. It's the best all-around defender for your health. It reduces inflammation, cholesterol, improves eyesight, and reduces risk for heart problems, as well as helps with joint pain, among other benefits. Today, I want to introduce you to Puriton's green vegetables. Puriton gets their ingredients straight from the high mountains of South Korea, and the omega oils are extracted from purslane and perilla seeds. It's 100% vegan. Now, personally, I've been using Omega for about 9 years, close to 10 years now. I've recently switched to Puriton for about a few weeks now. Here's why. We mostly get our Omegas from fish, right? But that's not the best case for everyone, especially there's the aftertaste. It might not be suitable for vegetarians or vegan. So the most important part, right, we often forget is the actual concentration for Omegas. Puriton soft gels have a much higher content for Omega-3, 6, 7, and 9 than many of the brands out there. And some say that they notice there's less hair loss, more energy, lower cholesterol levels, and overall improved health. I think the best part for me is the lack of inflammation or the reduction of inflammation. Other brands also they use this high heat method to extract the oil, which in turn creates a lot of harmful byproducts. Puriton's green vegetable is done using a patented method of supercritical carbon dioxide low temperature extraction, so it preserves the natural properties and maintains high purities. First of its kind. So get it for yourself or as a gift to your loved ones ahead of the holiday season. Use my code DZ2023 and you can receive free shipping globally. Check out my link in the description and comment today. First, the new government admitted that, of course, there were, debt to be paid, but that total is only about $12.5 million rather than $30 million. And then they said that they were only going to pay her $1.6 million US dollars out of the $30 million that she claimed. So in other words, they were only going to give her about 5% of the actual debt that they owe to her. And of course, she didn't agree since she has to pay the workers and everything else. No one would be taking that one-time payment knowing that it's to get rid of her. But it's not enough, of course, also to cover the costs that she incurred. In fact, in order to pay wages to her employees, Ms. Ma had mortgaged her house already, and as well as the car, and then borrowed money to pay for, all the workers that she has. Of course, in addition to all this, she still had other debt to, material, producer, suppliers, all of the people, right? Those people that were also waiting for funds to come in from the government to settle the project cost. Now, police first arrested her in this whole process, then let her go, and then placed her on house arrest, and then beat her up, and then arrested again. Her office was ransacked. She was beaten for it. But it wasn't until that this made state media that there was finally pressure onto the city by, higher ups. And then so after back and forth, the solution was to arrest her on trumped up charges, picking quarrel and provoking trouble. It's typically given this charge given to anybody who disturbed the CCP's social stability, aka tried to seek justice. So a total of 9 people, including Ms. Ma, her lawyers, and paralegals were all detained. Now their crimes were all exactly the same, picking quarrel and provoking trouble. And of course, because they posted the matter on Weibo, Douyin, and other social media platforms, and that, I guess, would be mistake number 4, but not really. Now, in the eyes of the CCP, right, when they're silencing Ms. Ma, all they had to do was just, give her some money and sort of play nice in this process. Had she not made this public to the rest of the country, right? That's their definition of being nice. But then after she posted her story on social media, the sheep's clothing comes off. And the CCP goes into full wolf mode, and they go straight for violence. Like thugs, you either agree to the conditions they set out and, wipe out the debt, take whatever the amount that they give you, or you'll be detained and essentially serve jail time for it. So that's why this is a representation of a wider problem in China, that the CCP officials of lower levels use public funds to do work that are essentially for show. They tout it as political achievement to further their career, and then they leave behind billions of dollars in debt. The new government officials are even worse. Sure, of course, they didn't want to pick up the debt. I wouldn't either, right? That's left by the last guy. But don't think for a second that if they were in the same shoes as Li, that they wouldn't be doing this to get promoted. So this is not an isolated case. It's a representation that if there is one Li, there are hundreds more across China doing the exact same thing to get promoted. All right, that's it today for the episode on what's happening in Guizhou province and a story around a peculiar case of Li, a CCP official and a business owner. If you enjoy the content, leave a like, comment below your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, bye-bye.